सब्सक्राइब कीजिए बॉलीवुड नेक्स्ट चैनल को और दबाइए घंटे को ताकि आपको मिल सके हमारे लेटेस्ट वीडियोस सबसे पहले।
मैम मैम इधर मैम थोड़ा आगे मैम थोड़ा आगे मैम थोड़ा आगे आइए और आगे
डरिए मत इंसान है वो
लेफ्ट साइड
हो गया तो चेक
लाइट ही नहीं पहुंच रहा वहाँ तक।
श्वेता मैम श्वेता जी
वो सारी फोटोज देखिए आप।
श्वेता मैम
तो रिस्पेक्ट करिए ना प्लीज। शी इज रिक्वेस्टिंग यू। शी she's half a call. I'm half a call.
मैम
यो
करण सर सामने सामने एकदम बेटा
करण सर यहाँ पे देखिए सर यो करण
सर सामने
सर इधर देखा ही नहीं। श्वेता जी रुकिए। श्वेता जी श्वेता जी
करण सर ये थोड़ा पीछे
ये कौन नया लोग है कह रहे? थैंक यू मैम।
वन मोर राइट
श्वेता मैम ये सेंटर मैम हाथ धरून नीचे करे।
निधि साइड पराग साइड सर फोटो जाए सर एक सेकंड सर सर हो जाए फोटो सर सर सर
अरे कितना आगे जा रहे हैं यार सर
अरे मागे आहे यार एवढी जागा आहे यार पीछे जो सब लोग चलो पीछे आ जाओ हाँ सर एक फोटो सर साथ में अरे फ्लैश फ्लैश हाँ नीचे 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 बाबा माझ्या पुढे पण आहे ना दादा दादा आधी जाय ना अरे यार सर 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 जय मैम जय मैम जय मैम श्वेता मैम थोड़ा साइड श्वेता मैम थोड़ा श्वेता मैम चुप रहे हो मैम 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 ओके ओके सर अरे मुझे देख ना साइड हो जाए गिरेंगे चल मेरे को लेना पड़ेगा
It was built in the late 60s or early 70s, modern in those times. And it's a story of the people who live in that building, the several families and households that live in that building. And at one level, it's a wonderful human story. At another level, so without giving away anything, I think I can, am I giving away anything if I say one of the denizens of the building mysteriously dies? And that, of course, sets the ball rolling on a whole different narrative. That's all I'll say, because you have to read the book. If you haven't picked up a copy already, copies are available outside. Please do pick up a copy. Wonderful read. And please then ask your friends to read it as well. Shweta writes with wit, with keen observation, with a very good understanding of human character and human emotion. And this is wonderful news for us at HarperCollins, but it's also wonderful news for the publishing industry in general, because we have here the arrival of a fresh, new literary voice who I hope and I'm sure is going to write many, many more books. And we are really, this has been, for all of us at Harper.
Hi and good evening, and a very warm welcome to all of you. We have friends and family of Shwetas in the house, and this is a wonderful, wonderful house full of love. So I have to say that I invited myself to host the proceedings. Shweta is very shy and never likes to ask anyone to do anything for her, but I invited myself because I'm mainly a host and I just direct whenever I get some free time. And so I decided to do this because I love and adore Shweta, and I have grown up with her. Both of us grew up and we got really close as children because we had one common factor. That was the bullying of Abhishek. We were both bullied, though we were both much older than Abhishek was. And I think Auntie Jay will tell us more stories than what she might remember. But I remember that we actually bonded when we were both tied to a tree trunk while the others were playing. Why we were tied to that tree trunk, only Abhishek will be able to tell you. And when I turned up to Shweta's birthday party in a Superman costume, though there was no theme that particular day, my mother, of course, was misinformed and sent me looking like Superman. So I have many, many memories of Shweta. But what I do know about Shweta is that she is an exceptional, exceptional talent. She's always stayed away from the spotlight, though everyone who's close to her and knows her well knows that possibly the best actor in the family is Shweta. Her ability to her ability to tell a story, her ability to narrate an incident, her ability to mimic many, many leading lights of the film industry, which they may never know of or never see because Shweta is that shy. But I always knew that she was talented, exceptionally astute, amazingly observant, and actually has a sense and an ability to write so beautifully that I knew, and I was not surprised the day I knew that she turned columnist, and then finally she turned author. When I read Paradise Towers, I knew that it was really a huge loaf of life, not just a slice, but a loaf of life. Everything that she's keenly observed, having lived in Delhi, having lived in Mumbai, having traveled the world, and mainly the way she addresses the characters, the way she actually points the nuances of human behavior is all there. Apart from that, her exceptional wit and her storytelling expertise is all there for you to see. Shweta, I wish you all the best for your debut venture into the literary world, and I'm sure that there will be many, many more, and you will do your father and your grandfather tremendously proud. Give it up for Shweta Bachchan Nanda, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, who better than her iconic and legendary parents to do the honors today? Both of them leading lights of the film fraternity, exceptional actors, exceptional entertainers, and possibly the most amazing people I know in the movies. They're like parents to me, and I'm very, very grateful to have known them in my growing years. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Shweta's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Amitabh Bachchan, Mrs. Jaya Bachchan, and Mr. Amitabh Bachchan on stage. All right, now that we have Mommy and Papa on stage, we'd like the Renaissance girl, as I call her, on stage. The spotlight is all yours. Yes, come. Shweta, come here. Okay. How nervous are we today?
Very.
You have anything else to add to that one-word reply that you gave me, considering you're meant to be amazing with words?
No, not right now.
Not right now? All right, okay. Okay, we'd like to unveil the book, ladies and gentlemen, and for that, I would request Mr. and Mrs. Bachchan to please do the honors. Yes.
It's there.
आप यहाँ आ जाओ। अमिताभ, तुम जो कमी है तो आप यहाँ आ जाओ। Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well done, Shavana ji. We love you. Jayanti, I would love to ask you what you're feeling at this moment. She said, "Good Lord," before I gave you the mic.
Good evening. Sorry for coming in late. Sorry, Shweta. Sorry, Karan. We got held very badly in traffic. I knew she would do this. Since she was a child, I knew she would someday write. Mother's instinct. What else? You just asked me one question.
That's it. You have nothing else to add to that? You knew she would write. Mother's instinct, that totally we all knew she would write. In fact, I was hoping that one day she'll act, but that won't happen.
I think that she's very inspired by your screenplay writing. Oh, me? Yes. Because the way you detail your characters, I think that's what she's done in this book. I was actually quite surprised, and I keep saying, Shweta, is this character that person we knew? Is this character? She says, no, Mom, no.
She's totally lying. They're all real people. And she's just not telling us. She's inspired by many people, and people perhaps is sitting in this room here. You'll never know. They may have found their way into her book. Even I feel some of the characters are very close to people that I think you and I both know. We'll discuss that later, Auntie Jaya. But thank you. Thank you for being here. Amit Uncle, may I please ask you what you're feeling at this moment?
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for having us here. It's a moment of great pride and honor, very emotional for parents to be at the launch of their daughter's book. As a father, I feel very privileged because she's my daughter, and daughters have a special place in my heart. I wish her all the very best. All I can say for the moment is I'd endorse what Karan said a little earlier on, that she really is the best actor in the family. Every time we go through some kind of a moment in the day, during any event, there's always a little family meeting at the end of the event at home. And she takes over and does a takeoff on everyone that was present there. I do look forward to this evening when she will do a takeoff on tonight's event. She's also very perceptive about observation, and I do rely on her many a times, as does the rest of the family, on many incidents that may happen within the city, within the home, within the country, within the world. She has an opinion. Many a times we discuss, I do, the outcome of a film that I may have done or a film that she may have seen. And I have to say that she's always been right. When she says that a film is going to do well, it does well. When she says it's not going to do well, it turns out exactly right. So many a times I have begun to share some of my scripts. I'm afraid I couldn't do many of them earlier on, and I want to be excused for that. But recently, though, she has been extremely helpful, very perceptive in giving me ideas and thoughts on what I was working on. I can only give you my love and my blessings, Shweta, and thank you so much, all of you, for being here today to encourage her to grow, not just as my daughter, but as a woman and as a lady. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amit Uncle. And may I also now please request you to read your favorite passage from the book for all of us. It would be an absolute honor. Thank you. Want that off? That's fine.
Shweta asked me to read certain portions of the book. She wanted me to read the prologue. I'll do a bit of that, and then a small portion inside the book as well. So in a leafy Mumbai suburb, on the very turn of a U-bend, stood the handsome structure of Paradise Towers, a residential building built in the late 60s as the last word in modern convenience. By modern, the builders meant that it had an elevator with a designated liftman and a garden that most bungalows would be envious of with its designated gardener. Over the years, other more modern and loftier structures came up in the area, dwarfing Paradise Towers. However, none could compete with its clean lines, meticulous planning, which kept it from flooding during the rains or its residents. The building stood a few meters from the beach, and depending on the time of day, it enjoyed either a balmy breeze or the stench of drying fish. The road it stood on was more a bylane that rarely saw any traffic besides the random vegetable vendor and fisherwoman who, with their baskets on their head, crossed over to their fishing village via the building twice a day. The facade of the building was vanilla white and got a new coat of paint every 5 years. On it was painted in bold brick red letters, Paradise Towers, vertically, with the S in the towers dangling just above the balcony on the first floor. That was another one of its unique features, whereas the buildings around Paradise Towers were painted steel grey. Their windows tinted black. Paradise Towers boasted a substantial balcony for every road-facing flat. It was a building law that the occupants were not allowed to hang their drawing on the balcony. So as the years went on, it retained its aesthetic appeal, while the places around it got cluttered and messy. The entrance was a wrought iron gate with arrowhead bars secured by a sickle lock mechanism. A smaller pedestrian gate was attached to it and was most often used by visitors and residents alike. A metal-sheeted guard's cabin stood outside the gate, though its inhabitant preferred to sit outside it on a folding chair, his register and desk fan jostling for space on a rickety stool in front of him. A wide concrete driveway led to the ground floor, where in the maze of pillars that defined the parking spots stood the elevator. A staircase, right by the lift, wound its way up the building, every even-numbered set of stairs being followed by a landing. The elevator was placed so that it divided every floor in two, with a flat on each side and a small lobby in front of it. The staircase also allowed access to each floor, and the substantial terrace, accessible to and all used by everyone for the drying of clothes, housing of water tanks, and the electrical room, and where all the staff gathered to moan about salaries and to gossip. Rarely in the spring, the building children would go up there to fly kites, but as the years wore on, the more modern modes of play were invented, the children lost interest. The flats were spacious and airy with large windows that let in the sunlight. They each had a small kitchen, staff quarter adjacent to it, and 2 bedrooms. The garden downstairs was lush and lined with bougainvillea creepers on the boundary wall, which spilled onto the road, shedding petals and carpeting the street pink. Well-tended flower beds with seasonal flowers ran all over the circumference of the garden, breaking only at its entrance, and a mud path ran alongside for those who wanted to walk. Palm trees flanked the driveway on one side, and there were talks of installing a water fountain, which was then scrapped in favor of leaving the driveway with a roundabout used for potted plants and a seating spot for the maids to keep an eye on their wards, who often played in the garden. The residents of Paradise Towers were an amenable bunch. They all interacted with each other, and the children were constantly in and out of one another's flats. The women had a committee which organized Diwali and Christmas parties yearly, and once even a 70th birthday party. They were fast friends and sworn enemies, but seldom any grave unpleasantness. Nothing dramatic ever happened at Paradise Towers, or so you might think. Of course, appearances can be very deceptive. So that was the prologue to the book, and there's a little small chapter on one of the elements that stayed in Paradise Towers. So Dinesh's vacant spot in the car park was soon occupied by a bicycle superfluously trilling its bell as Mr. Roy, his mop of wiry black hair ruffled by the wind and thick black square-framed spectacles balanced on the tip of his nose that he peered over, swerved into place. Dismounting his cycle with some difficulty, seeing as he had weighed under his arm a briefcase, Mr. Roy parked his ride, smoothed his clothes and hair by running a hand over them, pushed his spectacles back up his nose, and proceeded to remove something wrapped in layers of newspaper from the basket attached to the front of his cycle. From the shadows, a middle-aged man came forward and relieved Mr. Roy of his briefcase, leaving the gentleman to better hold his newspaper-wrapped parcel. Though the Roys had a car, Mr. Roy preferred to use his bicycle on trips to the fish market, or so he told his friends. The truth, however, was that he had once driven himself into the gutter right outside the building. A nostalgic song on the radio had set him off daydreaming, causing him to lose control of his car. The car and Mr. Roy were extricated from the gutter with great difficulty. One of the Kapoor children had even captured the entire episode on their phone. The car, though, sent for an overhaul, would always smell of rotting bananas every time the engine overheated. Mrs. Roy had ever since forbidden her husband from driving the car when he was on his own, and so Mr. Roy had resorted to using his bicycle for most errands. Mr. Roy rung for the elevator that whirred and hummed as it descended, the liftman smiling his broad smile as he came into view. The grill of the elevator drawn open, the liftman greeted his passenger, who once ensconced in the lift became the subject of his over-familiar repartee. "Fresh fish for dinner today, Sabji?" he asked, eyeing the parcel that Mr. Roy was now cradling in his arms. Mr. Roy gave him a perfunctory smile that should have indicated to the liftman that he found his questioning impertinent, but in this case managed only to encourage him. "When I was in my village in Bihar," the liftman prattled on, "we knew many Bengali families. Nothing like homemade macher jol, Sabji. It had been an age since I have had the pleasure of eating such delicately prepared fish." Mr. Roy leaned forward, pressing the button to his floor, which in his enthusiasm the liftman had forgotten to push, and the elevator began its labored climb to the second floor, where Mrs. Roy would be waiting to receive the fish that only her husband was trusted to select from the mongers, in lieu of which he would leave office early, using a made-up physiotherapy appointment as his excuse. With a click and a jump, the elevator came to a halt on the fourth floor, where the middle-aged manservant, now divested of the briefcase, was waiting to open the elevator door and let his boss out. The minute he stepped onto the landing of the fourth floor, Mr. Roy's superior olfactory senses picked up the most divine aroma. Tilting his head backwards and flaring his nostrils, Mr. Roy shut his eyes, gave himself up entirely to the scent. He followed it as if in a trance, only to find his reverie broken